So now that we've set up our database connection, we need to create a table. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just go in and make that table within phpmyadmin. This is just because when you're creating tables, you only have to do this once. So you wouldn't typically need to have a bunch of files that are constantly creating tables. You only need to do it one time for your website, and then for updating I usually just go back into phpmyadmin and update and create those tables. So I'm going to show you essentially two different ways to create tables. One using your PHP code, so if you want to have a file called setup or something like that and create a table that way, I'm going to show you that. And as well, I'm going to show you how to create it in phpmyadmin. So in phpmyadmin, we're looking at this new temp table, and I'm going to have to update that connection file to connect to this new database. So first of all, we need to come up with a name for our table, and I'll just call it test. So it'll be the same thing that I have down here, and we'll start out with 4 columns. And this should be sufficient enough for us to create a fairly good database that contains user information. So the first column that I usually do is I create an ID. So this is just something by default that I do because I like to be able to access all of my database table information using IDs. And another thing with IDs, you do need to have a unique identifier for each database table, and this is where ID comes in place, and this is just something I use on a regular basis, and you'll see that this is very common to set up IDs. And so with the tables, you need to set up something that auto increments so that they're all going to be unique, because I don't want to have the same IDs. And then as soon as I click this auto increment, it gives me the option to set up as primary. So what this means is that this as well needs to be that unique primary key within that table, and this is why this comes out primary. So I get all of that out of the way with just setting up ID, auto incrementing, and primary. So now I'm ready to set up what data I want to collect in here. So if I want to collect the first name, I'd set up variable character. I want to collect last name, and I want to collect age. So when we're setting up these database, the different field types, we've got a bunch of options here in the drop down, and you really do see there's a whole bunch of numbers. So typically the ones that I use most often is variable character, and this can hold up to 256 characters starting with 0. So we can set a length here. So I like to just set 255 because I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to have a first name that's above 255. So I don't have to worry about it past that. And the same thing for last name. I'm going to just use variable character and set it to 255. So over here for age, we want to treat age as a number. And so this is going to be an integer. So within this column in our database, we only want to collect numeric value. The same with ID. As an integer, we only want numeric value. So we have some options here for integers. We can do a tiny integer, which here it tells us we can be that there's a 1 byte integer, small integer is 2 byte integer, medium is 3 byte, and int is 4 byte. And so this becomes important, and big integer is 8 byte. So this, all this is doing is this is telling us how much space we want to reserve for this particular column. So if you have a really big database, you want to make sure that it's optimized and that you're using the correct data type that's the most optimized for the content you're selecting. So same thing with strings. I can do character, I can do variable character, and then I've got text here, which actually takes up the most space. So if I do something like text, this is going to reserve the most space in the database. I've got medium text, I've got long text. So I guess actually this one would be the maximum text. We can see it reserves almost 4 gigabytes for this one column. So this is a very rare case that you would want to reserve that much space for a particular column. And basically that means that it's going to drain your server when it's reserving that much space. And then here we've got some additional other options as well. So I'm going to keep it really simple and just stay with integers. And then here we just specify how many characters in the integer. So with age, I know I'm not going to get too many people that are over 100, but I do want to reserve that length of 3 there. So now I can save it, and this creates our table for us. So in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how to create another table and actually have it essentially the same thing that we've just done here, and just do it with PHP code. So I'll show you that in the upcoming lesson.